Hi, this is Ed Cohen in San Diego, California. And today is June 16, 2022. And we have a very special group here today as teachers, as people who know what they're talking about in the world of migration and immigration law. Very honored to have MayerBrown law firm involved with us. Grace Shie, thank you so much for being a leader here, along with Liz Stern, of course. Grace, please introduce yourself and your position in the firm, and help me introduce Paul and James.
Certainly. Thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. And I'm calling in here from Washington, D.C., so I'll say good afternoon. My name is Grace Shie. I'm a partner with MayerBrown in the Washington, D.C. office, and I am joined today by my colleagues from Chicago and from London, and I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Paul.
Good afternoon, Paul Sarauskas from MayerBrown's Chicago office, working with Grace and James on our global migration practice covering immigration questions throughout the world. James?
And I lead the UK immigration and European mobility practice from MayerBrown's London office, and helping our clients moving into the UK and also with their sort of mobility issues around Europe.
Great. Thank you all for being there. My background is public relations and advertising since I've been about 15. And my background officially is a journalist. And then they taught me how to write ads for newspapers and for a small business to advertise in the newspaper. And that was back in Boston. I relocated to LA in 1980. I had a business at the time called US Bound, which was in print, relocation guidebooks, and they're used as recruitment tools. And we spread that out further to become official guides for local chambers of commerce in New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., Miami, Chicago, and throughout California and Phoenix. That graduated into doing live conferences. That has graduated into doing Zoom. And here we are doing meetings without spending any money. So that's cool, isn't it, Paul, when you're able to do that? But there's nothing like being in person. And you people just came back from a live meeting, right? But it was also virtual, right, Paul?
No, actually it wasn't. It was going to be both virtual and live, and they just said, you know what, it's a new era. Let's just go live like we used to. So it was all in person and very personal.
Yeah, that's good. Grace, so you've done virtual meetings, and now you're back doing a live meeting. Of course, it's always better to press the flesh and smile and be smiled at. But wouldn't it be good? I'm just a theoretical question here, hypothetical, to have audience in Moscow and Dubai and Cape Town and Tel Aviv or wherever also involved?
It would be. And I don't know that is out of the question for future conferences. But this particular conference that James, Paul, and I attended, it was in New York City, and it followed 2 years of pure virtual conferences. We hadn't all seen each other since June of 2019.
Oh my.
So I think there was a recognition that with the pandemic where it is now, with travel restrictions having been lifted in the way that we needed to be able to bring everyone together, that the conference decision makers made it an in-person conference. And we really enjoyed that, being able to see our colleagues from around the globe. And given the nature of our area of practice, global mobility, we had practitioners and lawyers from Australia, New Zealand, to Lebanon, to continental Europe, the UK, South America, like Brazil, Peru, Argentina, and then North America. So it was wonderful to be together again.
Yeah, this is a prestigious organization, American Immigration Lawyers Association. And so this covered migration, like, for instance, the tragedy in Ukraine, with people just millions coming into Poland and Romania and elsewhere, and even here in the US. So everyone got expedited visas, or was it an emergency situation? James, how did that work?
So ultimately, lots of countries introduce special programs for those Ukrainian nationals. So in order to sort of expedite the movement into countries, because ultimately what countries wanted to do was make sure that they that all these people documented that they had legal routes into those countries, and therefore that makes it a lot easier for them to settle, to work, and and for that to be handled. The problem with that has been that has meant that has basically overwhelmed the immigration systems, especially in Europe. So what we are finding, especially when we were talking to our European colleagues, was that it's a general slowing down of visa processing sort of across the continent. And the challenge for businesses has been that just when everyone is getting back on a plane, just when people are starting to travel now, and businesses are normally quite used to quick processing times, those times have increased. So we've seen real challenges from business who are used to getting people on the ground quite quickly, now having to wait and having that sort of the start dates for these assignments delayed.
I'm going to circle back and talk about the Ukraine crisis, the tragedies, and also the opportunities. Grace, give a magnifying glass on the conference. What were some of the highlights coming out of your conference?
Sure. There was an obvious focus on the state of global mobility today. In the first year of the pandemic in 2020, we saw a freeze on international travel and businesses learning to have employees engage in work remotely. We had the introduction of vaccines last year and the lifting of certain travel restrictions. And so this year, the conference focused on where are we today with the state of global mobility. And, I think the highlights of the conference, the themes that were very clear was, where are we today with COVID-19? Do we still have travel bans that are based on geography or nationality? What is the impact of the Ukraine crisis for our European neighbors, for the UK, and also just the major theme that we saw throughout different sessions, the global war on talent, the fact that we're coming out of a year that was dubbed the year of the Great Resignation,
Right.
Many employers, many companies competing for talent. And what does that mean for the world of global mobility? Additional employer benefits, or are employees or candidates asking for new and different types of benefits? That was definitely a major theme throughout the conference.
Thank you. Paul, if I could ask you about just focusing on COVID and the pandemic and the scramble that's caused, that's impacted companies and cause and effect, right? So what do you see from a legal point of view, the confusion of how to, old time managers in corporations, they're looking out in the office and one guy says, I'm managing empty chairs, so, how are companies reacting to this as a competition for talent, of course, and everybody's been impacted differently because there's legal things that are the same impacting everybody, but everybody seems to be interpreting a little different. What do you think?
Well, the biggest difference we've seen over the last couple of years is the removal of restrictions. 2.5 years ago, it was impossible. It was just chaos. Anywhere you had to go, you had to look at that country's requirements. They changed based on day-by-day announcements of the COVID numbers. Countries listed certain countries in a red, green, or yellow category, or orange, as to whether or not they were safe or not safe to travel into or out of. Some countries totally shut down for years and wouldn't let anyone go in or out. Australia is one example of how they just shut down the borders. Even an Australian national couldn't leave Australia for over 2 years. You couldn't leave your own country. You were stuck. So the best news that we've heard recently, and at this conference too, is COVID restrictions are going away rapidly. Europe, for example, so easy to get into and out of now. All the countries are starting to do what everyone else is doing. Italy, Switzerland, Poland, Norway, no restrictions. You can just go. You don't have to worry about a COVID test, whether it's antigen or PCR. You don't have to worry about a 24, 48, or 72-hour test. It was just chaotic to try to travel. We became travel agents in addition to lawyers. And so now the good news is that little by little, they're all just disappearing, these restrictions. And again, like Australia, it's all gone. They call it the travel. It was a pandemic for them. It was a travel pandemic, and they're over it. They're fatigued by the pandemic. So they said, that's it. We tried, we couldn't stop it. open up our borders. So we're really excited to see that it's making it easier, not just for business travelers and lawyers and managers and CEOs of companies, but for the tourist industry. And the US has followed suit. As of this past Sunday, US said, you know what? Come on over. We want you to come back to the US. No more COVID restrictions or tests to get in as of this last Sunday, June 12th. And that's been huge news for travel industry, especially, which was hit hard by the pandemic.
Yeah, that's for sure. What about Africa? I mean, huge, mega space we're talking about here, and all the different countries and all their laws, pretty complicated. But if we can look at, for instance, South Africa, which is, as far as I know, very European from a business point of view, a lifestyle point of view. Who handles that for you, Grace?
We work with local counsel,
Mhm.
law firms and consultancies in South Africa with respect to local rules. I know that with the introduction of, or the discovery of certain variants at a certain point in the pandemic, some of the international travel bans were targeted, not necessarily to South Africans, but to travelers who had just been in South Africa because of the discovery of the variant in South Africa very early on. And that, of course, can be damaging in so many different ways. But some of the lifting of the travel requirements that Paula just discussed includes the lifting of geographic travel bans on travel from countries like South Africa. And hopefully, as the pandemic evolves, even with the introduction of new variants that are perhaps inevitable, hopefully we don't see the reintroduction of travel bans that are targeted to the countries where the variants are discovered.
Yeah. Okay, James, Ukraine. I would imagine most of the residents who had to flee for their lives are wanting to go back home someday if there's going to be a home there. But a lot of people are they stuck in Poland or Germany, Romania, or are they moving on to England, France, US?
I mean, ultimately, people want to be where their family is. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So what a lot of Ukrainian nationals are doing is they are moving to countries where they have family, they have connections, and what most countries are doing are granting sort of temporary immigration permission for them, say for up to about 3 years, and actually giving Ukrainians a choice of which gives them the choice of which country to go to. It's not as if that takes the pressure off those countries which are obviously at the border with Ukraine. But as you say, most individuals want to go back eventually. So, what the hope is that this 3-year period will give a bit of a breathing space. Hopefully, the situation is resolved in whatever way it is in Ukraine, and then people will start going back. But I think we'll certainly see a big movement back into Ukraine, hopefully when the situation resolves itself. Otherwise, in 3 years' time, obviously authorities will look at this again, and they will then decide, what they will do as far as maybe potentially granting Ukraine's longer stays in countries if they've started to settle and make lives for themselves.
So part of all this is health concerns. Well, I'm not going to touch on the mental issues, which I'm sure are there and visible, not just sub rosa. But the health issues of people who are fleeing, money issues, it's a migration thing. It's not an immigration thing. Of course, it is immigration, but it's like this flows of people who need help and guidance. Here in San Diego, there's reports of Ukraine's just south of the border here, 8 miles from where I sit, Tijuana. A very busy border crossing, as you might know. And if they have sponsors of some kind, they're expedited through into the US. But if they're not, boy, they just sit there in like a detention camp. And these aren't criminals, as far as we know, anyway. I don't know.
It's the mass numbers that I think it's the mass numbers. There's so many people coming in. Poland, for example, as we know, they've taken the big group of these Ukrainians, and they did it initially out of friendship to their neighboring partners, but now they're also suffering because they have so many coming in that they don't have the capabilities to maintain all this population. So from there, they're trying to ship them out to other countries. But we've seen such a huge exodus so quickly into Poland, especially, that it's a burden, not just on the people that are leaving and trying to get away and save their lives, but then they're entering into countries that can't help take care of them, which is a horrible burden for the local countries around them.
Right. James, UK, Britain has always been a welcoming place. Is it straining the system?
I mean, ultimately, yes, but I think what has been really good is that there has been this concerted Western response. So ultimately, all countries have been, I mean, we tracked all of this, and all, essentially all European countries and beyond all opened up schemes to help Ukrainian nationals, which meant that ultimately the burden has been spread. And, I think that traditionally that hasn't been the case for migration. Normally, the countries which border these places are sort of left to fend for themselves. I think it's been a good news story that Western countries have come together, have all introduced programs to help Ukrainian nationals, and therefore have spread the burden. And yes, it still means that countries are still taking, each country is taking on thousands of sort of new entrants. Yes, that is going to put pressure on local services, on infrastructure, but ultimately, we are all in the same boat here, and it's really good to see that there has been a concerted international response.
So, Grace, with competition for talent, there's a lot of talent coming out of Ukraine. Of course, the guys have to go in the army, but any woman who, ladies are trained to be executives and highly technical, skilled. It's been a back office for Western businesses for years. So there's a lot of talent. Are there companies going in there and looking for talent?
We, in the clients that we represent, we have quite a few who, as part of the humanitarian effort, have looked for different ways to reach that particular population, both to offer them positions in other countries, and as a method to give them a temporary relocation. And that's been part of, I think, the global effort, not just the regional effort, but the global effort, understanding that this humanitarian situation, for everyone to do their parts. And certainly we've seen some companies that try to match certain positions in their companies, whether it's based in the US or based in Western Europe, with Ukrainians. And there are many local nationals in the European countries that have tried to assist with this type of pairing. And that's been good to see the global community and the commercial community come together in that way.
So James, in the UK, I would think from other contacts that I've had and experiences that the UK is really sophisticated and well organized and humanitarian when they are dealing with problems. So I assume that is also the application now, taking care of people, just not leaving them in a detention area.
Yeah, and the UK has had to move, as I said before, a lot of resources onto sort of processing applications by Ukrainian nationals. They came up with two main schemes, one of which was that if you had a family member in the UK, so if a Ukrainian national had a family member in the UK, that family member could then sponsor them. And what was really good to see was actually they widened the definition of family members. Family members are normally seen to be spouses and children, but actually they've increased it to essentially any family member, really. So we're talking about grandparents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, and so that's been good to see. So that system's been working. And then actually what's been brilliant as far as sort of a response from sort of the UK population is that UK population anyone could sign up to sponsor a Ukrainian family. So if they had room to house them, then they could do that. And I think the government was actually quite surprised at the sort of how many people signed up for it. But certainly, and as Grace was saying, we've worked with a number of clients who have supported their people in sponsoring Ukrainian families as well. So so that has worked quite well. And I think that the UK government has actually been, very responsive to this. As I said, with the sort of the Ukrainian sort of family scheme, they quite quickly expanded it. So although they initially started with saying, actually, no, it's only close family members, they very quickly said, no, this is not right. We're going to expand it to include wider family as well, and that has been effective and I think an appropriate response to the issue.
Paul, digital nomads, work from anywhere, work from Canada, work from Belize. What are you seeing in Chicago?
That was a big topic too at our conference, and our clients, it's a daily request because they're getting people wanting to work from all over the world. And if you're in Chicago and it's a horrible long winter, wouldn't you rather go to Bali for 3 months? I know I would. So what we've seen is that there's been a opening up of borders even more for what we call this remote working or digital nomad visa. Countries like Canada and Mexico are extremely open to the fact that you can go there as long as you're not receiving funds locally or payment locally, and you're there just to work for your home company and not working for the local entity there. Come on in. Mexico and Canada, a U.S. national can stay there for even up to 6 months as a remote worker. In Europe, this is happening too, where Italy for so many years, Italy, I used to live in Italy for 15 years, so I'm very familiar with the Italian rules. In Italy, you could never remotely work, not even for 1 day. You needed a work permit. Italy decided, you know what, we've been hurt by the economy. We want people to come in. There's a chase for talent. We want people to come in and spend money in our economy. So just recently, Italy came up with their first digital nomad visa. You go to the consulate, you apply for a visa, you show a few documents, your passport, your insurance, your residence address in Italy, and you can stay there for a full year and work remotely. So we're going to see more and more of that coming up because there's a competition to get these people to come in, spend their money in that country, and also to share the global talent that they have in that local country.
So the issue, Paul, and everybody, the issue about digital nomad is localities worried that they weren't going to be able to get a tax revenue, all right, out of earnings or the nomad making money while they're within that geographic area. But what the Italians are doing, and now others are saying, well, we're going to get you on sales taxes, all right? So come on, go out to eat.
Eat, go shopping, buy a new bag, rent an apartment, and then spend the money and leave it in the economy. So that's definitely one of the reasons behind this, I believe.
Yeah. So, Grace, where do we go from here? What do you think is going to happen in the U.S.? It's a political issue and it's a political year. So I understand, I'm sure many of our audience understands that it's going to be a half-hearted effort no matter what. Or maybe the effort will be strong, but the results will be incomplete. What do you think?
I think commercially, employers will continue to come up with different ways to incentivize candidates that they're recruiting, both locally within the domestic labor market, but also to bring back the brain drain, but in the other direction, to have the U.S. be an attractive location, an attractive jurisdiction again, for all the global talent around the world. I think we're going to see different types of incentives being offered, innovation in the types of incentives that employees ask themselves beyond compensation. Historically, compensation has been the real attraction, but with remote work, hybrid working models, the ability to be able to pick up your laptop and go to Bali for a month or to Italy while still earning your US pay, I think those types of questions and the legal issues that are tied to that, not just the immigration issues, but employment law issues, the tax issues you just raised, Edwin, both for the employer and for the individual. I likely see developments in the law in certain jurisdictions and possibly some trends regionally as different countries and regions lift themselves out of the recession, given the pandemic, and look for a way to come out of that. So I think that's what we see.
Let's spend a couple of minutes as we come to a close about MayerBrown. And I see there's a new section, the mobile workforce in an era of change. Grace, is this a compilation digest or news report? What's the best way to describe this?
It's our blog. It's our blog. Paul writes regularly. He just wrote about Italy lifting travel restrictions. James writes quite regularly each time the UK introduces a change in law. It was a way for our lawyers to just directly write on legal developments or to engage in some thought leadership every time there's development in any particular country. And we developed this just before the pandemic, but really it became very useful so that if we wanted to reach our client base and just to reach our readers, it was a very easy and direct way. And for us, the name of our blog really reflects our view on global mobility, that it is an era of change. First, we saw that with the Trump administration and the legal changes that were swept in at that time. Then we have the international travel changes because of the pandemic. Then as we forecast where we go in this post-COVID era, it's a way for us to speak directly to our readers.
This show is business, it's not political, but I wanted to ask something that just popped into my mind about Russia. Not politics, but the tech people, the people in tech who have escaped, who got out right away when the war in Ukraine became apparent within the country that it was a bad thing. So tech people have fled, but I don't know where they've gone. Do you happen to have some insight in that, James?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yes. I mean, people have people in Russia who didn't agree with what is going on. A lot of them have left. A lot of them have struggled to leave to start with because some countries obviously were slightly reticent about granting them visas. But what we've seen is that ultimately, as you said, there's a global war on talent. If you have the talent, then you will be let in. And the UK, for example, was slightly reticent to start issuing visas, and now all Russian nationals are subject to additional checks. But actually, those have now started to come through, and certainly, I think that the globally, people are welcoming of anyone with the right talent, and that includes Russian nationals. So they will still be able to continue to move.
Yeah. So I'm looking at on the blog here the Ukraine crisis 10 key questions. James, do you want to address a little bit about that? I know this is probably more for Liz, who's not with us today, but would you like to give us a quick insight so people could look for this Ukraine crisis 10 key questions? And it's a video, apparently public.
It is. So ultimately, it's looking at sort of the key things to think about when it comes to what has happened with the Ukraine crisis. What does that mean for employers? What does that mean for individuals? And how this affects them. So looking at things like the fact that obviously a lot of companies are closing down their operations in Russia, so looking to move people out from there. And obviously, as you said, lots of countries and people and employers looking to help Ukrainian nationals who have left Ukraine and obviously trying to rebuild their lives until such time as they can return. So the blog, the podcast, sorry, not podcast, the webcast, looks at those issues and tries to sort of go over them in a sort of easily digestible format.
Great. Thank you, James. Thank you, Paul. Grace, would you like to sum up and tell us about how the firm is helping company executives and clients navigate through this transformational era we find ourselves in?
Absolutely. We just had a meeting today, and we all agreed it's about helping our clients make strategic decisions to solve complex problems and not taking no for an answer. If a client comes to us with, how do I get somebody from point A to point B, when I have all these barriers, whether they're healthcare related or health crisis related, conflict related, how do we achieve that goal? It's about us coming together as a legal team and being creative and coming up with options A, B, and C. And that type of strategic thinking. We deploy that regardless of whether the travel is Europe coming to the United States or the United States going out to Asia. It's really providing creative problem solving for our clients so that they can deploy their talent, whether they be executives, engineers, the tech talent you just spoke about, to achieve their business goals.
So the firm is enlarging the playing field here by advising on people issues. And everything's related to law. So it makes sense
right.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
things we talked about today is the fact for the common thread for all the employers that we represent. It's not supply chain. It's not cybersecurity risks. Certainly those are very important legal issues for the chief legal officer or the compliance officer. But really right now it's talent. How do we get people? How do we fill all the empty seats in our company, whether it's to make widgets or to come up with the innovative ideas for the next product or the next service. That type of innovation comes from talent.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to sum up?
No, I agree totally with what Grace said. I'm just so happy that all these travel restrictions are gone, because that was, I think, our biggest nightmare for the last 2.5 years, is trying to get our people moving, because even though the pandemic happened, our clients weren't stopping. They were wanting us to help them travel around the world. So I think that the most positive thing we've seen in the most recent weeks is the removal of all these travel restrictions. So you can just book your ticket, go on travel, whether it's tourism, business, or work. So that's the best thing that's happening in the last couple of weeks.
Thank you. James, would you like to sum?
I think that what is going to be interesting over the next few years as we move into this sort of post-COVID world is about how immigration policy is going to develop. I mean, what we're seeing is that actually COVID meant a lot of people left the labour market, and actually unemployment levels are at record lows in a lot of countries. So ultimately, countries are going to have to adapt their immigration systems if they want to get the people in who can help them grow, so can fill those vacancies and help grow their economies. And we're certainly quite excited to see what developments are coming in the future that countries will bring in to sort of address those issues.
Thank you, Grace, Paul, James. I've learned a lot. I think our audience has too. And of course, MayerBrown.com is the source. So thank you for being on Global TV Talk Show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Safe travels.
Please come back. Yeah. Okay, thanks. This is Ed signing up in San Diego. That's Paul in Chicago, James in the UK. Are you in London?
I'm in Washington at the moment, as it happens.
Oh, in Washington. Oh, that's cool. Well, I'm just tuning in here. That's and Grace, you're in DC.
That's right.
Great. Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.